Hello students, really happy to see you all back in this updated education virtual classroom. Today in this video we'll start a new topic called mixtures, and this video will be discussing under the subtopic called type of mixtures. Okay, before I come into the topic of mixtures, already you might have heard about the elements, compounds. So when I say elements, there are about 108 elements in the periodic table. If only one such element forms an entire matter, we call that as a pure elemental state. So if I say compounds, more than one element forms a molecule. Let's say water, oxygen bind to two hydrogens. This forms a water molecule, and then these water molecules forms a large matter or large collection. We call this as the compound. Similarly, they are pure state. So we call the elements and the compounds are the pure substances, and the mixture is the opposite of that, where more than one species get mixed to form a mixture. A very common example for the mixture is the fruit salad, where we have banana, pineapple, and the many fruits mixed. Okay, so that's we call as an example for mixture. So similarly, in chemical species also, we have different elements mixed and different compounds mixed. We call that a mixture. Important property of a mixture is it has to be able to physically separate it. Another good example for mixture is our atmospheric air. We call it as air. It is a mixture. It contains a mixture of gases. We know there is nitrogen in the atmospheric air, oxygen, carbon dioxide, water vapor, argon, helium, hydrogen, etc. Gases are there. Okay, and similarly our ocean, we have rich of nutrition in the minerals in the ocean and salts in the ocean like sodium chloride, calcium carbonate, and so on. So these are examples for the mixtures. Let's look at a mixture where naphthalene or the mothballs. So when I say naphthalene or the mothballs, they are white color spheres that in old days the people used to keep these in the cupboards or in the book racks to avoid some fungal contamination. We call that as the naphthalene or the mothballs. And it's a white color ball. Using a mortar and pestle, we crush it to white color powders. And next element is the copper sulfate. Okay. We know about the copper sulfate, it's blue in color, but the blue color copper sulfate is the hydrated copper sulfate. Let's say they are taking some anhydrated copper sulfate. The anhydrated copper sulfate, you all know the color is white in color. So now I have two white color powders. Okay, now I am going to mix these two white color powders and form a mixture. Now this is my mixture. In this mixture, each component we call it as the components that forms the mixtures. Okay, now we have a mixture of naphthalene and a copper sulfates. With this mixture, we look at some physical features of this mixture. Okay, let's say I add this mixture into a beaker filled with water. Okay, let's say I pour this into a beaker filled with water. Now I have a mixture that contains naphthalene powder, copper sulfate powder, and water. Okay, but if I allow this to settle for some time, I can observe some sort of precipitate is forming at the bottom, and a blue color solution is formed. Okay, now even I can separate this solution using a filter paper. Let's say I want to transfer the entire mixture into another beaker, keeping or placing a filter paper on top of this beaker. When I am pouring this into this, I will observe some white color powder is precipitating on top and a blue color aqueous filtrate is settled in the next beaker. You know the white, if we examine this white color powder is the naphthalene powder or the crushed naphthalene. And you know the blue color means the hydrated copper sulfate, or the copper sulfate when dissolved in water, that gives the blue color. So I can say the blue color aqueous part remaining is the copper sulfate. So from this activity, I can gain two knowledge. One is, even in a mixture, we say we had a blue color portion as well as a white color powder. Even in a mixture, each component do not lose their chemical nature. Okay, so we can say their identity is conserved or protected even in a mixture. And the second, in using the second activity, we can confirm we are able to separate the components of a mixture. Okay, we are able to separate the naphthalene powder and the copper sulfate. So the second feature is, in a mixture, the components are not physically bound; they are able to separate physically. Okay, so as a definition for mixture, we can say mixture is a matter that consists more than one species which are not physically combined and which can be which can be chemically combined and which can be physically separated from one another. As I think you can check your table given in your book for some more examples of mixture, like a piece of cake, a cement mixture where the sand, cement, water are mixed, and so many other examples. Let us look at some mixtures that we artificially make. For example, for mixture is the piece of cake. Let me take icing cake. I have a piece of cake at the bottom. On top, I have different layers of toppings on it. So if you look at the taste is not uniform from top to bottom in the icing cake. But when you considering a paint that we apply for the wall, if the property or the nature changes from top to bottom, what will happen when you are painting a wall? In one corner we will have one color, in another corner we will have some other color. This is not what we desire, what we require. We need, when painting, we have to make sure the color is uniform throughout the wall. The color of one corner and the color of the other corner has to be the same. In some other mixture like medicine, it again has to be a uniform mixture. But again, cakes and some other food mixtures, when we consider, they are not uniform, right? So similarly, in nature also, when we consider some nature of some mixtures, some are uniform and some are not uniform. Let's look at this nature with two activities. Let me take two beakers. For these two beakers, I'll add equal amount of water. Let me take this 100 milliliter of water, and for the first sample, let me add some little bit of soil into that. Maybe in a ratio, if I take 100 milliliter, maybe 10 gram of soil. Let's say I add 10 gram of soil. This is 10 gram of soil. Into this water beaker, let me add a 10 gram of salt. Okay. Now, as a student, you might be able to imagine what will be the observation when I am adding soil, as well as what is the observation when I am adding salt. Okay. When I am adding soil, you will see immediately the color changes to brown color that you see during the rainy time. The color of water in a river or drainage water, the color comes into a brown color. When I stir really well, I see the particles are whirling around, and let me allow it to settle for some time, for about few hours. And same with the salt. We can observe the clumsiness forms soon after I add salt. When I keep on stirring the salt solution, the color of the clumsiness disappears, and I start to observe a clear solution of salt or clear salt water mixture. Okay, so now if I allow this to settle for a few hours, I will observe some soil is precipitating at the bottom, and let's say the salt has entirely dissolved. Okay, then to remove this precipitate of soil form, let me transfer this soil water mixture into another beaker, keeping maybe a piece of cloth on top of the next beaker. So in this beaker, I can purely get a brown color layer of water only. Okay, and the mud part has been removed. And again, if I keep these two solutions for another few hours, now even you can imagine what will be the natures of these two mixtures. Okay, if I let me take I label the part part on top as A and the bottom part as B. Similarly here also, it label the top part as A and the bottom part as B. What can you observe? What can you predict in the transparency or the color of the part A in the position B? You know, in soil water mixture, you will observe a difference in color between the position A and B. In the position, the color will be really intense. At position B, the color will be really intense compared to A, right? Similarly, if you consider B and A in a salt water mixture, we know the color will be almost same and the solution will be almost transparent. Okay, we can modulate this a bit. I can let me take a piece of metal piece or a metal sheet, okay, and I add a few little bit of water soil mixture from position A as well as position B, and I place it on two different positions in this metal sheet. Let me label this as the sample taken from position A and the sample taken from the position B. Okay, let me heat this with a heating source, maybe a Bunsen burner or a candle or some other heating source. If I keep on heating this metal sheet, I will observe this water is getting evaporated, letting only the soil to precipitate at the bottom. Okay, after entire water has been completely evaporated, if I take this precipitated mass of solution out and measure the mass, I can distinctly say the mass precipitated at the position B is relatively higher compared to mass of soil precipitated at the position A. Similarly, if I carry out for this salt water mixture, I take a sample from position A and keep it somewhere here and label it as A, and I take a sample from position B and I label it as B. Again, I heat it with the heating source, maybe a candle or a Bunsen burner or some other source. When entire water gets precipitated, I can observe the salt get precipitated in the metal sheet. Now again, if I weigh the masses of this salt precipitated at A and B, I can observe the mass is almost same. The mass at A is almost equal to mass at B. Okay, so two different mixtures give two different natures. From this, we derive two types of mixtures. One as homogeneous mixture, and other one we give the salt water mixture as the homogeneous mixture, and the other one the soil water mixture as the heterogeneous mixture. We'll look at what is a homogeneous mixture. Here, when after the salt is really mixed with water, we couldn't see the salt and water distinctly or separately from one another. So we say in a homogeneous mixture, or when each component of a mixture cannot be identified distinctly or separately from one another, we call this kind of mixtures as a homogeneous mixture. Okay, in this homogeneous mixture, the composition will be uniform throughout the solution, or the composition is uniform throughout the mixture. If we consider some physical properties like color, transparency, its density, it will be uniform throughout this mixture. Okay, so for this kind of homogeneous mixture, we give a special name, call this as the solution. Okay, and similarly, let's move into our in homogeneous mixture, we can look at for some example like salt water mixture. We call it as a salt solution. Sugar water mixture, we call it as a sugar mixture, or copper sulfate dissolved in water, we call it as a copper sulfate solution. So the homogeneous mixture gets a special name of solution. Okay, then let's move into the discussion about this heterogeneous mixture. When in a mixture, each component of a mixture can be distinctively identified from one another or separately seen from one another. We call these kind of mixtures as the heterogeneous mixture. You can imagine a soil dissolved in water. You can see the soil suspension particles are floating and revolving in the water. Yes, right? So we call this a heterogeneous mixture. Here the composition will be not uniform. So if you consider the physical properties like its color, its transparency and its density, from place to place these physical properties will change. So one such example is the soil water mixture, and also you can have some the blue dye we add common names with Ujala, Nilma, these kind of whitening agent we add. Also we can have see a heterogeneous mixture here. Other than this, we can see the common practices like maybe a cup of tea prepared at home. It is another example for heterogeneous fruit salad. You can see the mixtures are not evenly distributed. The fruit salad also an example for this kind of heterogeneous mixture. Now you can refer your textbook for more examples in the mixtures and their nature in mixtures. Okay. Now we'll move our discussion in detail about these homogeneous mixtures. Okay. In another term, we call these homogeneous mixtures as the solution. In this solution, we say this consists of two types of elements. So we say this is basically we divide the components in the solution into two types. One as the solvent and the other one as the solute. Okay, let me consider a cup of milk mixture. I take a cup, I add to prepare a milk, I add hot water, milk and I add sugar. Okay, these are the typical things required to prepare milk. Let's consider, when I say solvent, solvent is a component that is present in excess amount compared to the other components. We call it as the solvent. If we compare in this milk mixture, we know when we are making a cup of milk, we might be adding maybe 1 or 2 teaspoons of milk powder, 1 or 2 teaspoons of sugar, but we are adding a cup full of water. So water is a major element or major component present in this mixture. So we call this water as the solvent, or we can label here the solvent in the milk mixture is the water, and we call the remaining all components of the mixture to be solute. We call the remaining all elements of the mixture to be solute. So here the milk and sugar belongs to the solute. Okay. Other examples, if you consider a sugar dissolved in water, it forms a sugar solution. Sugar acts as a solute, at the same time water acts as a solvent. So with this you can predict more examples for solution and solutes and solvents in it. Now let's move our discussion into solubility of solution or solubility of solutes in solvents. First my question, what is solubility? Solubility is the amount of solute that is dissolved in a solvent. Okay, but we cannot just say solubility of a solute in a solvent. Reason, if we consider 100 ml of water, let me take 100 ml of water. Into this, let me say keep on adding sugar. I keep on adding sugar until adding sugar and keep stirring this mixture. Okay, so when I keep stirring, the sugar water mixture, sugar will dissolve in water, forming a sugar solution. But at a time, when I keep on adding sugar little by little, at a time this solution will attain its saturation level, and I can observe the sugar will start forming precipitates at the bottom. At the position of it forming precipitate, stop adding sugars. Okay, let me take the mass of sugar dissolved to be X gram. Let me take another beaker and let me have 200 milliliter of water in it. Okay, for this solvent also, let me add sugar little by little until it forms this, until it attains saturation level and it starts forming its precipitate. Okay, let me take that mass of sugar dissolved to be 1 gram. Do you expect the mass of sugar dissolved in this solution as well as the sugar dissolved in this solution to be equal? Obviously no. We know here we have more solvent, here we have less solvent, right? So in the more solvent, more solute will be dissolved. So if I say the definition for solute is the mass of solute dissolving in a solvent, according to that definition, these two has to be equal. So I have to make my definition more accurate. Not only this, if we consider the same 100 milliliter of water and adding sugar into that at 30 degrees Celsius, as well as having a beaker where I have 100 milliliter of water at 100 degrees Celsius, and let's say I keep on adding sugar until it attains saturation level and forms precipitate. Now do you expect, let me take this to be Z gram of sugar has been dissolved. Do you think the sugar dissolved in this solution and this solution are to be equal? Again, no. Here again there is influence of temperature. The mass of sugar dissolved in this solution is greater than the mass of sugar dissolved in water at the same volume. It will be less, right? So we have to modify our definition for solubility for at a given temperature. So solubility of a solute in a solvent is said to be this mass of solute that is dissolved with 100 grams of solvent at a given temperature. So as a reference point, we take the mass of solute that dissolving at a given mass of solvent, that is 100 grams of solvent at a given temperature. For example, if I take the sugar that is dissolved in 100 grams of water to be 50 grams, I can say the solubility of sugar is 50 grams at 30 degrees Celsius. Okay, now let's move our discussion into the checking the nature or the factors that is influence the nature of solubility. Already we have said the temperature has an influence and the nature of the solvent also has an influence. Not only this, rather than I added this sugar into this 100 ml of water, what if I add for the same 100 milliliter of water at same temperature 30 degrees Celsius, what if I add salt? Do you expect the same mass of salt to be dissolved as sugar dissolved in the water? No. Now this is now a different solute compared to sugar. This will have a different solubility. So if it is x grams, so I can say this is to be a gram that is dissolved in 100 milliliter of water. So I can say next to temperature there is an influence of this nature of the solute. Not only nature of solute. Now rather than taking sugar dissolved in water, let me take a beaker at 30 degrees Celsius. Okay, and let me keep on adding sugar. But this time my solvent is not water. Let me take coconut oil, maybe 100 milliliter. Now with your common general knowledge, even you can imagine what will be the observation. Do we expect the same amount of sugar to be dissolved in coconut oil as the water, even though the temperature and the volume are said to be same? Obviously no. The amount of sugar that is dissolved in water is really high compared to coconut oil. So from this we can say the factors that influence the solubility of solutes in solvents are temperature and nature of the solute and nature of the solvent. Okay, out of these three factors, if we consider the nature of the solute and nature of solvent, we can say these are the properties of matter, and temperature is a phenomenal factor, and nature of solute and nature of solvent is the properties of matter. When we consider the properties of matter, in our generally we divide our chemical species basically into two. One as organic, another one as inorganic. Out of the three factors such as temperature, nature of the solute and nature of solvent, temperature is a phenomenal factor. That's something naturally occurs. And if we consider this nature of solute and nature of solvent, they are the properties of matter. Okay, so based on this, we can categorize our the substance or the material available in the nature into several groups. Okay, naturally we divide all the substance into two groups. One is polar and organic, and other one as the inorganic. The organic compounds are the compounds that contains carbon and hydrogen in it, and it has a origin from a biotic component. And rest of the component we categorize into the topic of inorganic. As well as you know from your grade 10 knowledge about the polarity in bonding in chemical substances. So this gives to two substances. One is polar substance and non-polar substances. These polar and non-polar substances both are available in organic as well as inorganic, right? So we have four different types of materials or matter in nature. One is polar organic materials, we call it polar organic solute or solvent, and non-polar organic solute or solvent, polar inorganic solute or solvent, non-polar inorganic solute or solvent. I recommend you all to check your textbook for the examples under each category, right? If you check these examples, even with your common knowledge, you can predict some solubility natures. From this, we at this chapter, as a conclusion, we say the polar substance has a good polar solutes has a good solubility in polar solvents, as well as non-polar solutes has a good solubility in non-polar solvents. For example, if we consider water and ethanol, both are non-polar, so both are polar, and if we mix water and ethanol, this will form a good mixture. At the same time, ammonia is a polar compound, water is a polar compound. When we mix these two compounds, again they form a good solution. So we say polar substances dissolve really good in polar solvents. Okay. At the same time, if you consider some non-polar substances like grease and kerosene, both are good examples for non-polar substances. Grease dissolve really well in kerosene. At the same time, jack grease or the jack resin is a non-polar. At the same time, kerosene is also non-polar. So the jack resin dissolves really well in this kerosene. So these two gives an idea that polar solutes dissolve well in polar solvents, non-polar solutes dissolve really well in non-polar solvents. Okay, now we'll stop the move our discussion in solubility into solubility of gases. Now most of us has a question: do gases dissolve, or do gases dissolve in water or any other solvents? The question. Let me assume the ocean is a big ocean. It's very deep. There are so much of aerobic organism that is living at the deep sea or the deep ocean. We know some aquatic organisms they come to top, but there are some other organisms they really only on the deep parts of the ocean. But they also depend on oxygen for their respiration and their survival. How do these organisms gain or get oxygen for their survival? So this is a good example or good evidence to say gases dissolve in water, right? This is how the organism get their aerobic organism in the ocean get their respiratory gases. At the same time, they release their waste gas out to the back to the atmosphere. Similarly, if you consider some artificial example like a fizzy drink or the soda water, we drink very famous brands are there like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Fanta. We have so many other brands. We have a common name, we call it as fizzy drinks or the soda water. What happens is they take a little bit of water, we call it sugarized water, and at a higher pressure using machines they compromises carbon dioxide gas into these bottles and they pack it as and sell it as a fizzy drink. So that's why when we drink the fizzy drinks and water, there is a difference. When we are drinking fizzy drink, we feel some sort of gases passing through our mouth, but when we are drinking water, we don't feel such a difference. So this gives an idea. Fizzy drink gases dissolve in solvents. Okay. So one of the factors is the pressure that helps more carbon dioxide to be dissolved in when making fizzy drinks. At the same time, temperature is a common factor for the solubility of all solutes in solvent. So when I consider solubility of gases, The temperature and the pressure both are the factors that influences the solubility of gases. We'll wind up this video here, and if any of you feel like need some notes for this lesson, you can please check the link that is given in the description below this video. Hope to see you all in the next video in the discussion about the composition of mixtures.